It happened a few years ago, shortly after I moved into an old house in the suburbs. It wasn't much. A modest two-story structure with creaky floors and peeling wallpaper. But it was quiet, and I loved that. The neighborhood was sparse, with just a few scattered homes along the winding roads, most of them obscured by trees. It was peaceful, and I figured it would be the perfect place to work and escape the chaos of city life. For the first few weeks, everything seemed fine. I spent my days settling in, unpacking boxes and arranging furniture. At night, I'd curl up on the couch, watch TV, and enjoy the stillness of my new home. But that stillness soon began to feel oppressive. It started on an otherwise uneventful evening. I was watching TV, the faint glow of the screen flickering across the room. I was about to turn in for the night when, out of the corner of my eye, I noticed something. Someone was standing outside the window. At first, I thought it was a trick of the light, or perhaps a shadow cast by the trees swaying in the breeze. But when I turned my head fully to look, my blood ran cold. There was a man standing by the roadside, just beyond my front yard, staring directly at my window. He wasn't moving, just standing there like a statue, his face partially obscured by the dim light. I froze, my heart pounding in my chest. Who was he? What did he want? I tried to rationalize it, thinking maybe he was lost or just some harmless passerby. But the way he stood there, motionless, with his head tilted ever so slightly toward my house, felt wrong, unnatural. Minutes passed, though it felt like hours, and the man still hadn't moved. A deep sense of unease crept over me. I grabbed my phone and dialed the police, keeping my eyes on the figure the whole time. When the dispatcher answered, I explained the situation, my voice trembling. They assured me they'd send someone right away. But by the time the flashing lights of the patrol car swept across my living room, the man was gone. The officers searched the area, shining their flashlights into the trees and walking along the nearby roads. They didn't find anything, not a footprint, not a trace. They chalked it up to a prank or a misunderstanding, and told me to call again if anything unusual happened. I wanted to believe them, but I couldn't shake the image of that man from my mind. That night, I barely slept. Every creak of the house, every rustle of the wind outside, set me on edge. I kept imagining that man's face, or what little I'd seen of it, staring back at me through the darkness. A few days later, just as I was beginning to convince myself that I'd overreacted, the police called. The officer on the line asked me a few questions about the man I'd seen, the details of his appearance, his behavior. I described him as best I could, though it wasn't much. Then came the part that made my stomach drop. "We believe we found the man you described," the officer said. "He escaped from a nearby psychiatric hospital about a week ago." I felt a shiver run down my spine. "Why was he in the hospital?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. The officer hesitated before answering. "We looked into his history. It turns out that the house you're living in, it used to belong to him." I felt like the floor had been ripped out from under me. My hands tightened around the phone as the officer continued, his tone grim. "Years ago, he lived there with his wife and daughter. But there was an incident. He killed them both." I swallowed hard, my throat dry. He was deemed mentally unfit to stand trial and was committed to the psychiatric hospital. But he escaped recently, and it looks like he might have been trying to return to the house. I didn't wait for the officer to say anything else. The moment I hung up, I began packing my things. I couldn't stay there another night, not after knowing what had happened in that house. I moved out the next morning, leaving behind everything I couldn't fit into my car. I didn't care. All I wanted was to get as far away from that place as possible. I'll never forget the way he stared at me, and I'll never go back.